So I was just notified that my well is illegal and then I'm going to have to cap it off. I guess I got to actually pour concrete down the hole and cap it off. As you know, I had an old well on this property when we moved here. And that was really the appeal of the property, was the well. Now, we saw several properties prior to this one that had wells on them. We actually saw one with 10 acres that had a well on it. Big issue with that one. And it wasn't even that much more expensive than this property. That was $7,200. We almost took that one, but there was just some things that we didn't like about it. Whereas this one was 100% perfect, including the well. Now, admittedly, when we got here, this place was pretty trash. The other place wasn't. This place, well, actually, it was. It had an old cabin that had fallen down. A tree fell on it. So we would have had to clear that up too. But this one had that trailer frame on there, so it made it really easy to build a tiny house on, and had this well. Now, the advertising on this well showed it had a well pump in it. It didn't have it, but when we actually got here, there was no well pump. Well, the well was dirty when we got here. As a matter of fact, it only had a little piece of concrete block, just a piece of the block, covering the hole. But water would just pour down that. I remember the day after we got here, we put the pump into the hole. A few weeks later, days later, whatever it was, a huge rainstorm came in. And water was rushing down into the well. This is before I had the cover on it. So fast it was doing that twirly thing. Well, I realized then I needed to take some corrective action and do something. So at the time I had a coffee can, 6-inch coffee can, to fit in that hole perfectly. And I was able to use some silicone and seal that up a little bit. And that gave us a little bit of a standpipe where the water didn't rush down into the hole, and it kind of drained off down the hill. And I dug a little ditch and just whatever I could to get the water away from it. But nothing helped. Not until the next year where I actually did it properly. I built this building around it, poured concrete, got it up about 6 inches, and got a well packer in there. As a matter of fact, yesterday I talked about this in great detail. And so I'll put a up next box at the end of this video. All you gotta do is click it, take you to that video that I made yesterday. Now the pump that we have in it, as I said yesterday, is an electric pump, and we run it off the generator, propane dual fuel generator, or a gasoline generator, either one. We have both, or solar panels. Now, admittedly, I don't run it off solar panels that much. The reason I don't run it off solar panels is we just don't have enough battery, is the best way to explain it. We have enough solar panels. The solar panels could do it. But what it is the pump uses so much energy so fast that there's no way the panels could keep up with it on a cloudy day. That being said, over a 4-hour period, the batteries would recharge quite quickly. So if I had a ton of batteries and a really good setup in the wiring and transfer was all good, we could do it quite easily. Now on a sunny day, it's not quite as bad. So today is partly cloudy, you can see. So when the sun's out, we're making enough watts to run that well pump quite easily. I think it's a 3/4 horsepower well pump. I think that equates out to about 800 watts. You can Google that. It's been a long time since I have. So I have 1,000 watts of solar panels, 800 watts of well pump. That means every hour it runs 800 watts of electricity, and I'm making 1,000 on a bright sunny day. See, it kind of just clouded up. The sun went behind the clouds there. So now, if the well pump was running, you would be able to see the voltage drop quickly on my batteries. That is not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is we have a freezer. Prior to that, we had a refrigerator. Now we just run a freezer. And we want to make sure that we always have enough electricity for the freezer. The batteries have to be charged before we go to bed. So that means the solar panels have to charge the batteries before we go to bed, so we have enough electricity to get us through the night. And then the next day, everything starts over again. If we didn't have that freezer, I wouldn't care about the battery supply. The batteries would always be in a charged state. I could turn on the well, run it until the batteries died. Not died, but got low enough that I needed to shut it off. The inverter would actually shut it off. It would say, oh, not enough energy in the batteries, and it would shut off. And then I just wait until it charged up, maybe 4 hours, and do it again, no big deal. So out of convenience, we run the generator because we want to make sure that that freezer is always able to run. Now we have an inverter. We actually have 3 inverters. We have 2 modified sine wave. That means it doesn't run 60 hertz. One of the 1,000 watt goes to her son's camper, and the 2,000 watt goes to the well. So if we wanted to run the well, we just plug it in 2000 watt, because that 1000 watt doesn't run it. And then we have a true sine wave, which goes into the house. That does have 60 hertz. It's just like the generator's true sine wave. And that's to ensure that the freezer will last as long as possible, because what happens is that modified sine wave tends to heat motors up, because the motor is kind of always cycling, not completely shutting off, but not completely on, because you don't have the correct 60 cycle hertz. Well, a lot of people will say, well, you should have just gotten a hand pump. I've considered this a lot. The one thing you have to understand is I'm not a prepper, but I cannot convince people of this. People are convinced that I have to be a prepper because I live off grid. The sad thing is these people who claim to be preppers, I think, let's say 80% of my audience is preppers. I would imagine I'm probably more prepared than 70% of them. And they're telling me what I need to do for water on a daily basis. Yet when they live on their daily basis, they turn the faucet on, water comes out. They pay the water bill, they pay the electric bill if it's on their own well, and then they talk about how big of a prepper they are. But I have to live this every day. So imagine every day or every other day or every 3 days, I have to come out here and I have to pump 75 gallons of water to put it in an IBC tank. I don't know why I want to do that when I can just run the generator so much easier. Well, that generator doesn't mean you're off grid. So everybody's just making excuses why I need to do more work to get water than everybody else, and then talk about prepping, which I'm not. I just don't want to pay the utility companies. I realize I'm still paying the propane company, nice family-owned business down the road. They sell some propane. I get it filled, military discount, supporting the community. Or I can run it off solar panels. Either way, it doesn't really matter. So I'm not really a prepper. I'm not really anything. I'm just an off-grid guy enjoying my life. And so I always say, stop prepping. Just live, be happy. And if you so happen to become prepared for some natural disaster or monetary disaster, well, so be it. You happen to be prepared. So I do think that if something were to happen, I am prepared for it. Now, if all else fails, I can always come down here to old city park. It's unincorporated now, nobody maintains it other than the townspeople. You can see here probably that they're cutting up trees that have fallen down and taking the firewood. I did the same thing just over here several years ago. So we all kind of just take care of the place. So I could come down here and get water out of this. This is a natural spring. I've showed this many times. It's surprising how many times I've showed it that people don't seem to get the point that I have a backup water supply. Yesterday's video, I was telling you how I think my well feeds this. Like there's a natural river up the hill down to here. It's probably, I don't know, 200 feet down, maybe 100 feet down from my location down the hill. We live in a very mountainous area. So this is getting fed by my well. So all I'd have to do, and it would be a little bit more work, but this is only if my well failed and we were in a terrible situation where prepping was required, I could come down here and get water. Assuming that it wasn't dominated by a bunch of thugs trying to get payment from me, that's a whole different story. I think that would be the more reality of what would happen, but assuming that we go and do what all the preppers say and be macho, I have this as a backup. Or if just my well pump died one day, I could come down here and get water. Now, a couple things about that. One, I have a backup well pump. It's a little big, and I've watched videos on it. All I'd have to do is take all the screening off of it. There's like screen plates, take all the screws off of it, and it would slide down. Since I put that well packer, it made the well smaller. So I have that one, or I could just go buy another pump. They're only 150, 180 bucks. It would take a few days to get. Now I have 275 gallon IBC tank that I always try to keep at 3/4 full or above. So about every 3 days I fill it up. Over the winter time I got lazy, but now Carolyn's son is here. I try to fill it up every 3 days, need it or not. Yesterday I filled it, and we really didn't need it. It was only a little bit out of it, but Carolyn wanted to get some water for her sinks so she could do some laundry. Her son needed to get some buckets filled up, so as I had it running, I went ahead and filled the IBC tank. So that gives me almost 2 weeks worth of water if something were to happen with my well. So I could probably get a new well pump in the time it would take for me to run out of water. Then it only takes a little bit of time, half a day or so, to pull that well pump up. Of course, I would pre-stage it. I'd pull it up a day or two in advance before I actually received it, hook it up to the pipe and lower it back down. So I think I have my life covered in any situation. But all that being said, I've had many commenters over the years tell me that this well is a problem. It all started out before we moved to the property. Started out with the well pump. Now remember, the well pump that is in it right now has been in there 2 years, and I run it 3 times a week for about half hour to 45 minutes at a time. I was told that wasn't going to work. My husband drills wells for a living. This is what he does. And I always get the qualifier that I have this experience and I know more than everybody else. Said the well pump cannot run at a continuous rate. It has to cycle on and off. That's why they put these pressurized tanks on wells. It has to cycle. Well, I was on a submarine. I know for a fact that is wrong. So I don't know how he is a professional well guy if he doesn't know how the well pump works. Oh, I know, because he drills the hole. He doesn't build the pumps. He's probably never rebuilt a pump. I have. I was a machinist mate on a submarine. I've even rebuilt really nasty pumps, ones, you know, that have to like do raw sewage. So I've done a lot. They always give the qualifier. It's actually better for a pump to run instead of that cycling. It's not the pump that will get hurt, it's the motor. The motor has to cycle on and off, and you're just wearing that out every time you do it. So the longer it runs, the better, as long as it doesn't overheat. Well, I just had a guy yesterday tell me, I got to cap this well. I got to pour concrete in it, which is going to be a major cost. I mean, it's 100 feet deep. I don't know, 6-inch diameter, that much concrete. I didn't do the math, but I know it's significant. It's going to be a lot to fill it. So I'm going to have to fill it with concrete, cap it off, because it's old and it's leaking groundwater. That's what I said in yesterday's video. It's leaking groundwater. But not all the time. It only does it occasionally in the springtime. And this year, I think we may avoid it. I know it's early spring, but we're not getting any major rains this year. So I feel like that the precautions I've taken are helping. It rained once really hard, and after that, I've not had a problem again. Now, admittedly, yesterday I told you my well pump fell down and it was spinning up some dirt. That could happen to anybody, though. That's not just me. Any well can do that. I talked about this earlier, that a friend of mine from YouTube asked me a question, and I felt like maybe his pump was too low and it was spinning up that dirt from the bottom. So they're saying that since my well is taking on groundwater, that it's contaminating all the other water around here. This natural spring, I suppose that could be the case. However, I feel like that I have taken lots of precautions to keep as much groundwater out of it as possible. Secondly, every time there's groundwater in it, within 3 days, I'm draining it out. Now, here we have this natural spring. Isn't it possible that groundwater is getting around all of this? It seems to me it's quite possible. The water has to be coming from somewhere, and I'm pretty sure I know where it's coming from. There's a river about 3 miles from us. And I would imagine it is at a higher elevation than what we are. And so I would imagine that river is soaking in through the bedrock over, the time, and it's coming down into this area here. I was in Virginia and I saw a natural spring, and I suspected that's what it was because it was always up on a hill, in the middle of a hill, just like this. It's kind of just right into a hillside here. That's how natural springs seem to work. They come out of the mountain. So I don't think that what I'm doing is that harmful. The thing is, my property was abandoned for at least 30 years. More likely, it's been abandoned since 1974. And that well has not been used other than maybe water in a garden or filling up a bucket for somebody. It hasn't been used. 30 years of dirty water contaminating this river, or me cleaning it out all the time. Now, another thing I have done, I haven't done it recently, is you can pour bleach down the well. It's called shocking the well. This is an actual procedure professional well people tell you to do. And you're supposed to do that every year. And then you just pump all that water out of it with the bleach until you don't smell that bleach smell anymore. And then that cleans that well. So you're supposed to do that once a year. Everybody should do that once a year. Now this guy claims to be a code enforcer or a retired code enforcer. If he's a code enforcer, it would seem to me that he would know to do that. Hey, you need to shock the well. If you got contaminated, dirty water in there, instead of telling me that I need to spend $5,000, of course, it's a government worker. Government workers think everybody's rich and that we all have an endless amount of money, that we should always do whatever they tell us. But any reasonable contractor will tell you, just make sure it's clean. If you have to pump out dirty water, dump some bleach in there and kill any contaminants. If you'll click this up next box, take that video where I made yesterday, I was talking about the well. So I hope I can inspire you to not listen to all the fools out there, so you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.